Hi guys, my name is Sukhaja. Welcome back to my booktube channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about the book that I have just finished reading and the books that I plan to read in the next few days. Basically, a lot of books. So, without further ado, let us begin by talking about the book that I just read a week ago, The Ghost Wall. This has been on my TBR for the longest time, and I'm so glad that I read this book. This is a 5-star read for me, and it's also a very short book. So if you're planning to read it, you will finish it really soon, and therefore it is worth picking this up. The Ghost Wall is basically about a group of people who come together in order to replicate a scenario. They are taking up this experiment on experiential archaeology, which means experiencing what it's like living in a different time. They plan to replicate what it was like to live in the Iron Age for a lot of great British ancestors. The Iron Age was a prehistoric time in Britain. So these people, which includes a family of 3, a father who is very passionate about archaeology, and his daughter, whom he has brought up teaching all about, archaeology and stuff, and his wife. His wife is rather submissive and he is rather the dominant member of the family. Initially, this experiment starts off as a potentially innocent one. But then as the weeks go by, things start to take a turn for the worse and things start to get very dark. This family gets caught up in this frenzy of trying to get everything absolutely right because the father believes in doing everything by the books when it comes to living in the Iron Age. While they're just play acting and while they're trying to do a sort of method acting, this becomes very intense and they sort of start to act like as if they are living the actual lives and they are the ancestors themselves. I found this book absolutely stunning. It's got a very unique premise, nothing that I've read like this ever. I usually read historic fiction books, but it was nice to see a literary fiction piece where people try to make history in the present. So another thing that I noticed about this book is that the lines between the past and the present get blurred. It really transports you to a very different place and you really feel like you're there witnessing all these people live their lives in those mud huts, and they're perfectly well educated, perfectly civilized people, including a professor. But it's so easy because that line between being civilized and being insane is quite fragile. So you can see that in this book, and she's really a masterpiece when it comes to writing. Within very few pages, she's packed in so much. So I definitely think this is the kind of book a book club would enjoy unpacking. I recommend reading this. I don't know if I've given away the spoilers. There's a lot of rituals. This has that in common with The Secret History by Donna Tartt, where this group of students who study the classics, they again try to replicate Naji. So I love books that have this sort of dark academia strain to them. This does not actually, but then it's very intellectual at the same time, but at the same time it also deals with personal familial issues. So while they're trying to explore a prehistoric society of Iron Age people, they are also exploring the personal, the family, which is the basic unit of society, and the kind of things that happen within a family that affect the larger society. All of that is there as well. So there's a lot going on here. Highly recommend reading it, and if you have read it, I'd love to discuss and hear your thoughts about it. Yeah, so that was the book I recently read. I'm currently reading a couple of books. The first of which is Alexievich's Chernobyl Prayer. This is a book that is very intense, and I picked it up because I needed more information about Chernobyl after watching the documentary series. And I also hear that there's a podcast which I link in the description box down below in case you're interested in knowing more. So this book is again based on the real life recordings of actual people who lived through the disaster when this happened. A lot of people who lived gave their sound bites and they were interviewed. The family members who survived this and those who lost near and dear ones, they give their testimonies. So this is a collection of testimonies and therefore it's really difficult to digest. The first story itself is very poignant and it's about this lady who is married to a firefighter who on the very next day after the blast, he goes very close to the core and he develops radiation sickness, which means he dies within a week. She is pregnant with his child and it takes a real toll on her, and the authorities are unable to disclose the real reason as to why she shouldn't touch her husband, she shouldn't go near him in the hospital, and she finds this really hard to believe and deal with. This is just the first story and it was so striking. And another thing is I feel like the documentary series did justice to the book as well. Like the story is there in the documentary as well, but they've captured it just like it is on the page, which I think is amazing. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this, and I think Alexievich is an author who has lived through both the wars. So she has a lot to say about this particular disaster that she feels is worse than the Second World War as well, because the nuclear matter that was released, the nucleotides that were released into the atmosphere during Chernobyl, will continue to remain in the atmosphere for many, many millennia. And the repercussions will be felt not just in Russia but all around the world. That way, this is pretty like an urgent read. And also, it being Women in Translation Month, I decided that it would be best to read this book. Check my Instagram account, Bookish Bulletin, for updates. It is bookish.bulletin. In case you would like updates and reading thoughts, etc., I will share them on my IG stories. So feel free to give me a follow over there as well. Another book that I'm currently listening to is We Are the Weather. Johnathan Saffran Foer is Jewish American. I have yet to read any of his fiction, but I picked this up because I watched an interview that he gave at Waterstone's bookshop, where he talks about this book. He thinks that eating meat and reducing our meat footprint, reducing the amount of meat we eat, will really help us save the planet. So he draws a correlation between what we eat at breakfast and how that affects the climate, and how there's this urgent need to do something about the climate, and how people are kind of in denial. The whole world seems to be taking a back seat, and climate change is just not a glamorous topic. So he opens by talking about how people in the Second World War in the US, they didn't believe initially that a lot of terrible things were happening across the Atlantic, like in Europe. A lot of destruction, death, and Holocaust was happening as well. But they didn't believe that. So despite being in that state of denial, President Roosevelt was able to garner support and ask the people to show solidarity. And they were able to do that. They were able to switch off their electricity every night because of the air raids that were happening. Even though all of this was really hard for them to do at the time. So that brings this video to a wrap, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there's any other book that you plan to read from the list of books that I've shown you. I will be back with another video where I talk about the books that I'm planning to read and the ones that I've brought. But I'm going to have to cut this video short. So I hope you like the list, and let me know if there's any of the books that you plan to read. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel and spread the word. In the meantime, stay safe, and I will be back soon with another bookish video. Bye!